So what is your Oprah story?
So that's probably the question I get asked the most when people find out that I've met Oprah. People that come into our home, who see the photograph, which is proudly on the wall in the dining room, ask me, "My God, you met Oprah. How did you do that?" It's funny because it's not something that I talk about a lot. It's very private and a personal journey for me. And it happened so many years ago, 2002, I met Oprah. But yeah, it is a question that I get asked a lot, and I guess for me it was the reason why I started this page, because I know that now Oprah's coming. A lot of people are going to say, "Mel, how did you do it? I want to do it." So for the first time in all this time, I'll tell my Oprah story. So it started way back in the late 80s, early 90s. I had my son Shannon, my firstborn child, in 1991. And for the first time in my life, I was quite young, 22 when I had Shannon, I found myself at home as a stay-at-home mum, not doing things. I'd always done things. I went straight from school, straight into college, did a Bachelor of Education with a double major. Busy, 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 that's me. And all of a sudden I found myself at home with a little baby who slept, and I was like, well, now what do I do? Who am I? What do I want to achieve? I want to be a great mum, but what else am I going to do with my life? So a friend of mine said to watch the Oprah show. She loved the Oprah show, and her and I started watching it together, and I immediately became hooked. And I found that the show was really good for me because there was times where I felt quite alone as a stay-at-home mum. Back in the early 90s, it was sort of like, it wasn't as sort of held as high, I guess, as it is now, thankfully, because it's a really important thing to do, to be at home with your kids. And when you've only got one little one, it can be a little bit lonely. You do feel a little isolated, particularly if you're trying to get their sleeping routines right, and you don't have your friendships close to you, and you've got to drive and all of that to go to see friends. So yeah, it was my daily me time, and it was awesome because it fitted in perfectly with Shannon's feeds and his sleep times. So that was my ritual, my daily ritual, and I felt and found that it was like a classroom for me. I learnt so much. I read so many great books, different movies, and just was introduced to some great concepts on the Oprah Winfrey Show, which was wonderful. And I didn't realise at the time, but really helped me out later on when I actually became quite sick when I was pregnant with my third child years later. Mackenzie was born in 2002, and I wasn't very well with that pregnancy. Still maintained my Oprah ritual. We moved interstate and came back. Big life changes, having 3 boys. But when I got pregnant with Mackenzie, I just didn't feel right. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And having watched the Oprah Winfrey Show for so many years, I had learnt really well that I needed to listen to myself. So I went to my doctor, who is awesome, and he said, "Look, Mel, you're pregnant with your third child. If it was anyone else," because he got to know me, I would say, "Just rest a bit more. You'll be fine." But he didn't. He said, "I just feel like you are, that something's not quite right." So I had a whole lot of tests and discovered that I indeed did have something quite serious, and it was a liver tumour, and it was very large. It was the size of a golf ball, and I was pregnant with, my third baby. So I had some really big, hard decisions to make, and I really feel that it was watching the Oprah Winfrey Show and seeing some of the stories that I'd seen, learnt from some of the, the guests, and indeed Oprah herself, that I felt strong enough to make some pretty good decisions for myself and for my baby. And I decided to fight, keep my child, go through the pregnancy, and see what happened afterwards, which ended up being fine. I ended up having a large surgery, removing the tumour, and going through what is a tough thing to do, but going through it I'm really proud of the way I went through it, and I do believe it's because of some of the things I learned through the Oprah Winfrey Show and some of the books that I read, Marianne Williamson's book, and some of the principles that I had in place in my life.
So you went from being a spectator of Oprah to actually meeting her? What?
Yeah.
How did that happen? Because
So-
there's a million people who want to have that
right.
experience.
And it's interesting because sharing some of these stories, you realise that people that have met Oprah have got big stories to tell. And I think it's part of the reason why they are driven to meet Oprah, because they kind of want to share it with her. So during that time, I decided that when I got better, the one thing I wanted to do was to meet Oprah. And so I wrote that down. I wrote a list. I kept a gratitude journal, and I wrote a list, a bucket list if you were, of what I would do afterwards. And so when Mackenzie was 2, I got on a plane all by myself and went to America, and I did not know a single soul. I didn't even know where I was going to go. All I knew was I was heading towards a conference that Marianne Williamson, who I was lucky enough to have met actually previously in Adelaide, was holding. And this was an international women's conference. It was in Detroit, Michigan. I had never been there in my life. Didn't know anyone there apart from Marianne, who, you know, I didn't really know. I just knew of her. But I just had a feeling that going there was going to be life-changing for me. So I got on this plane, left my kids with my husband at the time just then, and waved goodbye, and went on a 10-day solo journey just to find myself again and to get my strength back again. Went to Detroit. Marianne Williamson is the most amazing person. Although she was so busy organising this conference, she still made sure that I had someone that I could make contact with. She knew I was coming. I'd emailed her. And I had met with her beautiful assistant Elaine over there, who was gorgeous and looked after me and took me out for dinner and took me to this conference on that day. There were 5,000 women at this conference, and it was quite overwhelming. It was a very big, beautiful hall in Detroit, and there was an amazing array of speakers throughout the day. And I got there, and the people that took me, Elaine was busy. She was backstage with Marianne. She works for Marianne Williamson. So the people that were with us sort of had their own seats, and they all just went off on their own. And I was kind of there by myself, which was probably the best thing for me, because I was able to just listen to myself again. I knew that Oprah was coming on at that night, and I had the whole day just to enjoy and listen to these speakers. Unfortunately though, I was sitting in this really crappy seat behind the lighting booth, and so this guy was up and down with the lights, and I could not see a thing. I couldn't actually see the stage properly because he was right in front of me. So I had to look at the screens and watch all these speakers, Marianne included. And I was like, damn this, I've come all this way from the other side of the world to see Oprah, and I have to watch her on the screen. I might as well be back in Australia. I was quite annoyed about that. So at dinner time, I left, went out into the foyer, walked around, didn't really know anyone, so I was really by myself for the whole day. Went to the toilet and had a little chat to God and the universe and said, listen here, this is not good enough. I'm not in a very good seat. I've come all this way. Help me out here. I need to get a better seat. So, I don't know. I think maybe it was because I was by myself and some of the lessons I'd learned, but I went back inside after dinner when the bell rang that Oprah was going to come on stage. And I walked down to the front of the stage where I knew she was going to speak because the microphone was set up for her. And I just stood in front of the stage, and I just stood there. Stood there. Stood there. Started to feel like an idiot. Kept standing there. And then all of a sudden this lovely voice said, hi, are you here by yourself? And I turned, and it was this really lovely lady, and I said, yeah, I'm here, and I've come all the way from Australia, and I don't really know anyone. So she started talking to me, and her friends started talking to me, and then the lady behind her started to talk to me. She was obviously listening in, and she said, oh, we've come all the way from Canada, and you're here by yourself, you don't know anyone. Look, how about if you don't have anywhere to go after this, you'd come home with us to Canada. So at that moment, I just relaxed. I thought, it doesn't matter what happens from here on. I'm fine. I've got these lovely new friends. And then she said, and anyway, I told them about my seat. She goes, there's a seat behind us that's been free all day. No one sat there. Why don't you just sit there? And if someone comes along because they just come to see Oprah, then you just excuse yourself and say, sorry, that's fine, and move back to your seat. But if not, this is a much better seat. 4 rows from the front, a little bit in, really close to the aisle. So like Oprah was there, I was here. So I sat there, chatted away, the most loveliest people, they were just gorgeous. And then Oprah came on and I was so close to her. I could see her, I listened to everything she said, bawled my eyes out, you know. It was an amazing experience. Halfway through Oprah's talk, they started setting up microphones in all the aisles, and I sort of like looked and thought, oh my God, what's going on here? Because I knew that Oprah was the last speaker. And I thought, no, we're not going to be able to ask her a question, are we? Really? And I don't know what made me move. But she was in the middle of talking, for goodness sakes. I got up out of my seat and I walked to the aisle and stood in front of the microphone. And as I'm doing that, a few other people started to do the same thing. It was like, oh, what's going on here? This is sort of like this feeling in the room. And Oprah herself goes, oh, am I asking? She didn't even know. Am I asking questions, am I? Okay then. Right. So I was right at the front at this microphone ready to ask her a question. I had no idea what I was going to say to her. She went to someone else first. She went over to that side of the room first, and then she came to me and she said, what would you like to ask me? And I don't even know what I said. Honestly, I wish there was a video of this because I'd love to know. It was something probably ridiculously stupid because I was overwhelmed. But I started to talk. And Oprah just stopped me. Whatever I was saying, she stopped me and she said, where are you from? And I said, Australia. And she goes, get out, like this. And I went, yep. And I've come all the way to see you, Oprah. She goes, get out, like this. And she said, come here. So I went up to the stage. She got down. She's the most beautiful person. And she's so in the moment. She held my hand. She squeezed it so tight and squeezed my rings into my hand. So I knew I was alive and this was happening. And it was real. And she said, what can I do for you? What do you want? And I said, I don't know. Like I had what I want right here. She goes, come on, what do you want? And I said, look, I watch your show every day. I'd love to see a taping in real life. And she's like, is that all you want? Fine, done. Go backstage and meet with my staff and we'll organise that for you. Well, that was the beginning of the most incredible experience I've ever had in my life. Went backstage, met with her staff who were all amazing, so professional, so caring, so thoughtful. They organised my flights to Chicago from Detroit. They organised a hotel for me to stay in. They organised limousines to pick me up from my airport, from my hotel to the airport in Detroit, from the airport in Chicago to my hotel room in Chicago, to then the next day to the Oprah Winfrey Show to Harpo Studios. I watched 2 shows being taped at Harpo Studios, got to go backstage and got to meet her entire team backstage, which then was another amazing experience. Oprah, when she came in for her first show, saw me and came and said hello to me. She made the time. She spent time with me and there was a whole audience of people there for her that day. She came up to me halfway through, squeezed my hand again and said, make sure you come backstage, which I did. She introduced me. When we were backstage, we went through the green room, we went through the control room, which was amazing for me. And she introduced me to every single person as we went. I wish I could remember everyone's name, but I got to meet everyone that was there that day. When we were backstage in the corridor, we just stood there. I stood there with her staff. I had probably one of the most life-changing moments of my life. And that was I was standing with someone that was holding her diary. Now, it was a big diary, like a big black diary. And they had it open like this. And she goes like this to me, check this out. And I looked at it and it was Oprah's day on a page. And no joke, it was like in 5 minute increments, pretty much. She's going, look at this, look at this. And then I looked up at Oprah and I looked at her diary and I thought, my God, look at this day that she's having and look at how she's focused with that person now and how she's focused with that person now. It was not like she was in a hurry. It was amazing. I learned so much that day just by being with her staff that I knew from that moment on what I wanted to do. And I wanted to go back to Australia and take what I'd learned and apply it to what I love, which is to talk, to do radio, to inspire others, to bring great ideas onto the air and to give them a voice. So I came back to Australia and yeah, I've pretty much done that from that moment since. It's Pink on your hit music station, Power FM. It is Mornings with Mel, thanks to BP Eastside, of course. Brad and Steve back in the Power Pack tomorrow morning from 6, catching up with Sam Frost, The Bachelorette, which starts, of course, tomorrow night on Channel 10. Looking forward to that show, actually. I hope she wants.
Look at this. What's this, Liz?